Hello lovely people, today we will be talking about this Illusion Audio three-way set. So if you missed the initial overview video that I did a few weeks ago probably about this set, go watch that one. Thank you MotoRogue for sending me these to check them out. And what I did finally, when I got my car back, I installed them like properly. So here in the kicks we have Illusion Audio C6, which is a 6.5 mid bass. I have another one in this side right there. They're very shallow. I do apologize because it's already dark. I cannot find any time during the day, so now it's evening when everybody's sleeping. So I have them then the kicks, and you can see there's plenty space for all the activities. My Alpine status drivers that I had before were sticking out quite a lot, and when I was driving, sometimes I could hit the magnet, but with these, it's so much space. They're very shallow because all the motor and everything goes inside, so it doesn't take any space at all. The mid-ranges, I put them there in the dash, one and one over there. And the tweeters, I just put them in these places. I just made some spacer rings. Yes, it is cardboard. It is fine for testing. It is a thick cardboard, but it doesn't look pretty, but it's perfectly fine functionality wise. So I did put them there just to have them on axis. They're spot on axis. However, I do have, because like if you can see, this front baffle itself, it's not like really recessed, so it's not perfect. And we will see from the measurements as well, I'm going to show that we have some stuff happening probably due to these reflections from here. So it's going to be a good lesson as well. But they are on axis, they are playing. So I think first, let's jump into the laptop. I'm going to show you all the measurements. I'm going to compare them with the Alpine status drivers that I had before, because I have all those measurements as well. And I'm going to put the measurements for the One Audio widebands that I had very recently before these. And I'm going to tell you how they sound, how they perform, and most importantly, how they measure and how I tune them. So let's jump into the laptop. So just a heads up, whenever I'm testing any of these drivers, I always try to tune them to the same kind of house curve. And the house curve that I chose is always kind of the same for everything all the time, which is this one. So everything is flat, like down to 200, and above everything is flat. And then I have a rise of bass of about like 17-18 dB down to 30 hertz. So first let's have a look at the raw performance of all these drivers. So this is the left tweeter and right tweeter, Illusion Audio. So these drivers are simple, like normal typical dome tweeters, and you can see we have something happening like here and maybe here on the right side, and this could be due to the reflections, because again the pillars are not designed specifically for these drivers, so it has some like baffle reflections and stuff. But in general, if we're going to have a look at the left one, we can see a very nice response, very flat, a little bit here and a little peak at the bottom end. So these were crossed at 1.5K, I believe, I'm not sure. So I think potentially these drivers have quite a high Q, because you can see the bottom end, it's kind of rising. But in general, it's just very nice response. Cannot complain about that. Just for comparison, I'm going to show you the Alpine status tweeters that I had before. So this is the left status tweeter compared to the Illusion Audio. And you can see the status is much worse compared. Illusion Audio is a much nicer response on the left side, and on the right side we have a very similar situation. So on the right side, the status kind of rolls off, and it has like massive issues here at 2K, which is kind of in the crossover region. If we're gonna look objectively at the measurements only, these Illusion Audio tweeters perform much better than the status ones. So EQ crossover is very simple. As typical crossover, I think I crossed them at 3K. So this is only with a crossover, no EQ. And you can see the response is very nice, just with a crossover and no EQ. A little bit extra energy at about 7K, so I just chopped it down just a little bit and flattened it out, and it's very nice. I could have boosted this, but for this is just for testing, I just left it as it is. But even with no EQ, the response is very nice. From the right side, something similar, crossover, and it needed a little bit more EQ. But something like this. I did boosted the top end, as well, just because why not? But after all, left and right, it ended up something like this. Now the mid-range is the most important thing. So the left one and the right one. So they're kind of similar. If I'm going to compare the left mid-range with the status that I had before, left mid, the response is kind of almost the same, almost identical. The status has this cone breakup at the very top end, and the status doesn't play as low because the status has a much higher resonant frequency, and these illusion audio mid-ranges, you can see they play low all the way like down to 100 hertz, you can say. So they have a lot of bottom end, and the top end is kind of similar. However, if I'm going to compare this to the one audio, so the one audio, this at the bottom end is different because the one audio was with the crossovers. I don't have the response without the crossovers, so apologies for that. But the biggest difference is the top end. So for this, when I had to EQ the illusion audio, since I crossed them with the tweeters at about 3K, you can see that this region was like in the crossover, and I ended up choosing a quite low target curve because of this roll off and dip, and I lost a lot of energy here at the bottom end. These mid-ranges can play cross down at like 150 or something like that, but I did cross them eventually at 200. So left mid with the crossovers, just like that. So just chop off the bottom end quite a lot. You can see like probably like 10 dB at like 150. And then the top end, I had to chop off only this, and this was already in the crossover region. So with my target, after EQ, ended up something like this. I had to boost these two regions, but it's high in frequency, so it's totally fine, and I lost some energy. Now let me show you the right one, and then we're going to talk about the mid-ranges. So the right one, very similar with the status. You can see very similar, it's just the bottom end that is different. And compared to one audio obviously plays much higher because it's a wideband driver. So that's that. Crossover, just like that, chop off, and after EQ ended up with something like this. A little boost here, a little boost here, and everything else choppy. So left and right mid-ranges, they ended up something like this. And this was the tweeters. And you can see issue number one is the level. Now, after EQ, I didn't cut it that much because you can see I have quite deep dips in here, so I had to choose a target as I chose. I couldn't choose it even higher because then the top end wouldn't follow my target. So I EQ'd kind of the same as the status, but the problem with these is that these are super insensitive mid-ranges. Now, probably because they play very low, because you can see they can play down to 100 hertz, cross at 150, so they play very low, and that comes with a sacrifice that you're losing sensitivity. And even in my mid-range shootout, I did test these drivers, and they showed the lowest sensitivity from all of these. I think it was, I don't remember, was it 83 or 84 dB? So like super insensitive. And this is exactly what I heard while playing the whole tune system. So I'm going to show you everything else, how I tuned it. But the mid-ranges are lacking. They really need a lot of power. And now I'm thinking like, why? It could be because these mid-ranges have a massive face plug. It takes a lot of cone, and there's not much cone left, to be honest, because it's not 3.5, it's a 3-inch with a massive face plug, and it doesn't move a lot of air, maybe because of that, but they're so insensitive that I felt it straight away, that the loudness is nowhere near if you compare it with, even with the status were louder as well than these, but like comparing to one audio, it's like night and day. The dynamics, they're not there at all. One audio is much louder. So mid-ranges. Now let's talk about mid-bass, because mid-bass is very fun. Let me remove everything. Left and right. So they're kind of similar, and they play, you can see, down to 45 or something. Now the thing with these mid-basses is that they do have quite a lot of X-Max, as I mentioned, and they do play low. I did play them just like that with no crossovers. On like moderate levels, they do play down to 50. Very, very nice. They have like a proper bass. So like if you don't play it loud at all, you could cross them into the IB subwoofer, but obviously you're not gonna have a lot of level from them. And with a lot of excursion that they have, I think they have like 6.6 millimeters or something, which is much more than the status drivers on full tilt. I had to cross them at 85 hertz or something. These I did cross them at 65 hertz, and they do manage it. They don't complain. Everything is fine. So this is with the crossovers, and this is after EQ, something like that. So this is just to follow the target. But this target was, I think, 80 hertz acoustically, but they were crossed 65 electrically, and hence I have level like this compared to the mid-range. Because when I had my status drivers, I had to cross them lower, and I lost the overall level just because the bottom end was not catching up. But with these, you can see the difference between, there we go, the tweeter as well. You can see the tweeter is there and the mid bass is there. So the mid bass is very sensitive. It has a lot of output. It can be crossed low and it handles. And from all of these drivers from the three-way, the mid ranges is the most disappointing part, just because of the overall level. Argument can be made, and it would be 100% valid, that my install is not optimal for this three-way. The mid bass, yes, it's perfectly fine in the kicks. It does an amazing job. There's no rattles because, again, it's kicks, it's not doors. In the doors, when I had these drivers in the doors, they rattled the door to pieces, even on head unit power. So it's not ideal. But in the kicks, they perform perfect. However, with my mid ranges being in the dash, it doesn't really work. Maybe if you would have the mid-ranges in A pillars aimed towards you, like you wouldn't lose a lot of in this area, you would have a bit more. But even in my mid-range shootout, I did notice that they do roll off, similar to the status drivers, so they don't have that top-end extension. So yeah, and the problem is that these tweeters, you cannot really cross them lower than that. I didn't measure the distortion yet, but it's a typical 1.5 inch tweeter. It's not gonna play down to 2K, no way. So yeah, the mid-ranges are very, very disappointing loudness wise. Okay, let's finish with this ride bass, a slightly different, crossed again at 65 and I don't remember, 200, 220 or something like that. And then a little bit of EQ, so lost a little bit of these peaks, and we ended up with something like this. Left and right, something like that. Now, after all these drivers were EQ'd like that, you can see that the bottleneck is obviously the mid-range. So I had to pull the tweeters down because I didn't want to boost the mid-ranges. Potentially I could increase the gains on the amplifier, because on the DSP, on the channel gain, I couldn't do it because I had a few places already boosted by like 5-6 dB, so it's not really an option. The only option would be increase the gains on the amplifier, but I really didn't want to do that, so I just left it as it is. And after everything, you can see I pulled the tweeters quite a lot down. I had to adjust the targets a little bit just to give a little bit more top end because I didn't like how it sounded like. But after everything, it was something similar like that. I had to pull the mid basses quite a lot down as well. So tweeters pulled down 5 dB. Mid basses, I think, pulled them down even more, because with this target that I chose, I didn't change anything on the subwoofers, and that's why you have this big massive mountain where the mid bass lives. So I tried to pull it down, but if I pull it down, I have a little gap here. So what I did eventually, I just used EQ on the virtual channels, and I pulled 150 hertz by -8 decibels. So the mid bass is there. It's a lot of mid bass, and it's gonna be perfect just to alleviate some pressure from my front subwoofer, because my front subwoofer is working really, really hard. And this is the house curve that I was aiming for. So yeah, a little bit more bass than I usually have, just because these mid ranges are not there. Because if I'm gonna increase the target just to match with a sub level like this, something like that. You can see that I could pull the mid bass up, I could pull the tweeters up to this level, but the mid ranges I couldn't pull them up, so I had to pull down everything else and without changing anything else with the system, because these subwoofers were adjusted for the one audio mid ranges. So you can see how much I'm missing just because the mid ranges are not sensitive at all. So now the main question, how do they sound compared to the status and compared to one audio? So the mid bass in the kicks is killer. I never had a better mid bass than this. Like my status drivers, you cannot really compare them because the status, it does kick well, but it doesn't play that low. These crossed at 65 where they can still handle everything. Like what I noticed is even on this side where I have it in there, I feel the energy going into the floor. So it is metal, it is sheet metal. But like on full tilt, you can feel it just because I don't have any deadening at all anywhere. With the status, I couldn't feel it anything, but with these, they do give a very, very good punch. And as I mentioned, on very low levels, low, it's not low, like maybe 85 up to 90 dB, you could potentially play them without crossovers. And I think they would handle, like, if it's not super heavy, bass heavy music, if it's like something like rock, metal, or EDM that doesn't have very low bass, they would handle it perfectly fine. With heavy rap down to 30 hertz, yeah, they will bottom out, but on any other music, they would hold perfectly fine. These tweeters, I don't know, it's nothing special. I cannot say that there's something magical, just normal tweeters, nothing special. But the mid ranges, to me personally, I have to emphasize is that it's in this install that they don't fit. If you would have them, as I mentioned, maybe in the A pillars, they would be a little bit closer. Maybe they would behave a bit different. But with so much level loss due to sensitivity, it's not even comparable with one audio. One audio is miles ahead in dynamics and in loudness compared to these. Now, don't get me wrong, they do get loud. Yes, you can crank them up, you can crank the gains up and everything, but if you're comparing A to B, one audio wins the game. Status drivers are louder than them as well, but just like that, using the same house curve, using the same tuning techniques, they lack in sensitivity. Now, how do they sound? They sound nice. They sound. So, when I was talking about one audio, that one audio is like a precision scalpel. Like everything you're gonna give it is gonna show everything good and bad. These are not like that. These, I can feel that they are. I don't know if I'm gonna make a good analogy, but one audio is like if you take a board and you're gonna drag it through the asphalt and you can feel everything. These are like a soft brush. They kinda don't really hide the details. They're detailed. They sound very nice, but they sound pleasant at the same time. When you play heavy rock with harsh electro guitars, these sound nice and I don't like it. Maybe it's gonna sound weird that maybe you would want like a pleasant sounding system to sound warm and you could listen to it for ages. I don't like it. I like the bite that the one audio gives me. I had a little bit of that bite from the status drivers, but these are like for daily systems, they would be perfect. They're very pleasant sounding. They're very mellow. If you want to just chill out and just listen to them with no ear fatigue or no nothing, these are perfect. They're very, very nice sounding drivers. But if you want something to bite, these don't do that. These are like Labradors that are licking your face instead of a Rottweiler that is growling into your face. I don't know with these analogies. I'm not an audiophile, but they do sound very, very nice, but they're not for me. I need that a little bit of harshness. Even with these tweeters, they're kind of, I don't know, metal tweeters or whatever, but they don't give any bite at all. They sound very pleasant, very nice. Maybe it's the tuning that I did, I don't know. But yeah, this is just, again, these are just my impressions, how I perceive the sound, but they do sound different compared to One Audio. They do sound similar to the Status, I want to say, but even more mellow than the Status. Status are not as mellow as that. But these mid-bass drivers, oh man. Like, if I would have to choose from all this three-way, I would definitely go for the mid basses. Mid ranges, I would choose something different. Tweeters, they're not bad tweeters, but like for the price, I think you can find much better tweeters. But the mid bass, I think the mid bass is the driver that shines in this three-way set. I saw that Illusion Audio makes a coaxial driver, like 3.5 or 4 inch. That is coax, and you can buy amp it, so you can have it active. I would like to try that one out, but it's not in the cards. So, from all this three-way, I'm planning to somehow utilize the mid-bass drivers. I'm not sure, maybe I'm going to put them in the rears, or maybe in the doors, not sure. In the front doors, I mean, because the next test is going to be One Audio 8-inch mid-bass drivers in there. But yeah, this was Illusion Audio three-way, kind of how to tune, how it sounds, how it everything. And again, it's just my opinion, so do with it whatever you want. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.